MixMaster labels for kits and cans. Inside MixMaster, there are two label sections. We have the general label and another label which will be known as the global harmony label. For most users, the dominant label window is the following. It is the general label shown here. To use this window, it's very simple. It's just a matter of selecting information that needs to be placed into the fields that you'll be using for your label. And then with over this section here, we have what is known as the print control and design. Looking at this, we can see that we have a particular printer that we'll be using for the label, the paper type associated with that label. To the right, we can actually use fine-tuning adjustments as far as position of label, number of labels, and obviously the print button. To begin using any of this and having it work for us, you have to begin with the construction of a label design. You have to build something that is going to work with your specific label printer and the specific paper type that you're going to be printing on. So before starting with anything here, as far as typing values in and pressing print, you have to begin with creating a label design. To do so, just take your mouse, click on the button, Label Design. That will open up the screen called the Label Layout Editor, which is broken into three sections. We have a three-tab menu structure. The first one is Specs, the second item is Fields, and the third tab is Designs. So we'll begin with the Specs tab. And on the Specs tab, what we'll have for information is printer information. We have a category for the printer. So what we would do is open this menu box and select or scroll through the choices of available printers and then simply just click on the printer of choice. Once you've made that printer selection, it's best that you scroll through the list of paper types that that printer supports. Now, these paper types are actually supplied by the printer manufacturer. So if you have a properly installed print driver, for this case here, this is just an HP laser printer. These paper types do not come from MixMaster. They come from the HP printer print driver. So if the print driver is installed correctly, you should see choices in here. For most people that are using labels, they will be working with common label printers such as the Dymo or the Zebra printer. And when you install those, you will see a very diverse range of paper types. You may see things where they're actually in measurement, as you could see something like here. Here's a reference to a particular paper size that was displaying in measurement. Although you may see other selections where they're given more descriptive names, like letter. And letter is a measurement of 8.511. You have legal, which is 9 by 14, something along those lines, and of course other choices. So make sure that before using this feature that you have properly installed the appropriate print drivers so that you can select the printer and you have the correct range of paper types that you're working with. And once you've done that, obviously these selections are very simple to make. The next category is orientation, which is very simple. For most cases, the portrait and landscape are the two types. The reverse portrait, reverse landscape are older formats that are legacy. These were brought forward from much older iterations of MixMaster. They haven't been discontinued, but 100% of the people that are working with labels are using either a portrait orientation or a landscape orientation. After orientation, we have the next category, which is label properties. And this becomes important because it all depends on the type of paper that you're using. For example, some users may be printing out on very small Avery shipping labels, which when you look at the sheet, it might be an 8.511 piece of paper. But when you look at the labels, how they're spaced out and arranged on that sheet of paper, you may have 3 columns and maybe about 12 rows. So you would have 3 shipping labels across, maybe 2 shipping labels across, depending on how wide the label is. So in that case there, if you're working with a more complex label sheet, you have to set your label properties with across and down. So in the case if you had 2 across, you'd have to use these up and down buttons here to move the value. So in this case here, I'm just pressing up, I'm pressing down to change the numeric value. If we were going down the sheet, we could say we have, just using these buttons here, I could set it to 12. Well, in this case here, I'll set it to, we'll just do 10. So in this example here, we have 2 labels across and 10 down. And now what we want to do is put in our label measurements. So if with an Avery, you might find that the width on it might be, let's say we'll bring it down to 4 inches. Once again, I'm just using these buttons to move the value up and down. And of course, now I can do the length of the label, which in most cases, length and height could be intertwined in how you describe it. So we could have a width of 4 inches, but say we'll have a height of, or height of length or of say 3 inches. Now, of course, the display and measurement, it's set for inches, but if you prefer, you can click it to millimeters if you want. And then also what we have here on the specs tab, last but not least, what is known as the start print position. That is the coordinate of the label in the top left corner. So imagine just this fine corner point here being your label. It's telling the software where we want to indent and start the printing of the first piece of information and where everything else will flow from there. So for example, if you notice top margin, this is example, this word top margin, it's not tucked up in this top left-hand corner here of this, if we were imagining this was our label. It's been moved over maybe 1/8 of an inch, and then it's down about 1/4 of an inch. So that's how you would use start print position. If you wanted to indent and move your text over from a top left position, you would use top margin and left margin. So for most people, leaving it at 0 and 0 provides you with the maximum use of the label. The next item to work on is fields. So after we've kind of gone through the specifications, we now move on to fields. And fields is the content of what's going to be on the label. So what you'll notice here is that we have a number of checkboxes. And this column here is called print data. The next column here associated with some of these items is the title. And then finally, we have a row of checkboxes associated with the use of a barcode. So if we wanted to include the color name on our label, we just simply check that box. Now, if I wanted to add another item such as the date, I could check the box on that. And instead of it just printing a date, for example, today's date is 10/27/2001. If I wanted to incorporate what is called a title, I would actually have a title that would precede that date. It would say date, D-A-T-E colon, and then space, and then you would finally get the value of the date, which would be 10/27/2021. So you can put the use of a title on the information. So that way there, you not only see the data, but you actually have some kind of formal identifier explaining what it is. Date is pretty self-explanatory, but in terms of a lot number or job number reference that may be on the label, if it's just a cryptic number that's being used as a lot number and also a cryptic number being used as a job number, how would you know which one is which? It may become difficult just to look at this data and not know which one of the two is the lot number or the job number. By checking the box and putting the title, now we know that lot number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's a lot number versus job number 9987. So clearly you may want to consider the use of a title or not use of a title. And going through this, we can actually do a barcode association. So if we wanted to take advantage of these checkboxes, we would have to tell the software that we wanted to use one of these different formats of barcoding supported by MixMaster. I highly recommend for just global use of barcodes that are widely accepted, widely used, code 128. There are many iterations of different barcodes available, but code 128 is a dominant barcode used on many goods and products. So for intents purposes, if you're going to use barcodes, make sure you're using code 128. So for simplicity purposes, I'm just going to deselect a couple of these items here because we will be going to the design grid, and I want to start off with just one item in our design grid. So for the moment, we're just going to use as a single field color name, and I'm also going to appropriate the use of a barcode for it. So with these selections made, I'm going to move over to the design section. So clicking on the design, now what I have is the ability to work a little bit on how I want my label to present itself. Now, I can choose any one of these two things here on screen by clicking on it with my mouse and holding that click down. I can drag the item all across the grid. I can move it any way I want just by dragging and holding and placing it by letting go of the mouse button. I can also, while it's selected, I can take advantage of this here, which is called Move Item. It has a left and right arrow. It has an up and down arrow. If I want to move this item across the grid using these, I can do this by clicking on the buttons. Every time I click, it moves it an eighth of an inch in each direction. So in this case here, some might consider this a little bit more fine-tuned and a little easier to use than drag and drop. Same thing with the barcode representation. I can click, I can move it, and so forth. Now, keep in mind, this grid structure here is how many inches? It's 4 inches tall and 7 inches wide. Now, in terms of designing, you don't have the ability to use all of this grid structure. I mean, technically, in terms of the software, I can place it anywhere I want. There's no restriction. But you have to keep in mind this grid structure represents the label that you're using. So for example, let's take a quick look at our label one more time. We're using a width of 4 and a length which would represent a height of 3. So if we looked at our design grid, the width would be starting in the top left corner, 4 inches wide. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that means we should be in this group of 4 columns. This is our 4 inches of width. We also have a length or height of 3. So if we start counting from the top, we've got 1 inch, 2, 3, and 4. And we did say that our label was 3 inches in height. So technically speaking, we can't put this down here. This would be outside of our label proportions. So everything needs to be right here within these 4 columns and these 3 rows. So when using the design grid, make sure that the pieces that you're going to be placing on your label fall within the boundaries of the dimension of your label. Another thing to keep in mind is the size of the font. Now we're looking at just a brief description of something called color name, which is only just a few characters long. But MixMaster does support a color name being up to 30 characters in length. So if you place this too far over to the edge of your label, and this is a long name, what ends up happening is the spelling of this name would have to spill out onto a second label. So it is always best to make sure that you construct or build your label with your content over to the left side of your label. So choose items accordingly and place them so that they're safely built or placed within your label so that they won't overflow or cause an overflow where it wants to or needs to print on 2 labels. For other further adjustments that you can make here, you can obviously when selecting it, you can change the font of the item. So in this case here, the color name is an Arial and it's selected at a 15 font. If I wanted to make it smaller, I could scroll through the numbers and then just click on the number of choice. So I just took that font from 15 and moved it down to 12. Conversely, I could just go right back to 15 by clicking on it. When it comes to the barcode, it is best that your barcodes are in a larger font. You want to make sure that your scanner doesn't have any difficulty reading that barcode when it's printed out. I would recommend that you at least move it from increments of 25 or more. 25 seems to be a fairly sizable font size for the barcode that will give the laser the ability to read those fine lines of thick, thin, and obviously spaces where there's nothing. It will give you a good barcode for legibility. Now, once you've made your arrangements on here, I always recommend when building a label, start small. When it comes to selecting fields, don't choose several items at once. Choose one item, choose exactly what you need, and place it on your label and save it. So in this case here, what we're going to do is save this label, and we're just going to go into the description, which is called default label. It's just a default template that we'll be using, and I'm just going to save, and then I'm going to say yes to updating this label, which will then bring me back to my printing screen. So in this case here, this is where I could type in something such as test, the word test. And as you can see, when I put some data here into this field, this is kind of a view window of what your label might look like. So in this case here, I can see the word test is going to be printed with this barcode representing this. And at this point here, what I want to do is make sure that I print this because I want to test it. I want to print it. I want to make sure that the piece of paper ejects from the printer and it contains this information placed exactly where you want it on the label. If that is successful and everything looks great, then you repeat the procedure of going back to label design. You click on your label design, and immediately, if all of these settings are correct in the specs tab, we need to do is go back to fields. And what we need to do is add in something like date. So we'll add the date and we'll add the title. And then what we can do is go to the design section and we can find a place of where we want date to be. And once again, has to stay within the boundaries. This is a 4-inch wide label and it can't be any taller than 3. So it can't be down here and it can't be over here. It has to be within the boundaries of the label. At this moment, I'm going to place it just conveniently right there. If I want to fine tune it, I can move it with my up and down. And then what I want to do is save this change. So I will press save and I will overwrite the default label. And then of course now what I will have now is an additional piece of information on my label. I now have my color name with the barcode, and now that I've added the date, I can see that this will be the secondary piece of information that will be printed on my label. Once again, print it, test it, confirm, and if everything looks good, return back to label design. Proceed to fields, and then choose what other item you want. In this case here, we will bring in the lot number. We will bring in the title for it so that when we see that description of data, we know exactly what it is. And we're also going to bring a barcode into that use as well. So I will proceed to designs, and I can see I have lot number and the barcode representing that item. I am going to change the font size on the barcode. It is currently selected, and I'm going to move that to 25. The lot number, I am going to shrink that down a little bit because I don't think I need to emphasize it as much as color name. Matter of fact, I'll even bring it down to 10. And what I will do is place that right there. Matter of fact, I'll fine tune it just like that. So this is the third component being brought to my label. And what I will do is actually press the save button, overwrite the existing design, return back to the main screen. I will type in the word test, and then for lot number, I'll just randomly put in some numeric data. So as you can see here, we have a label that's slowly coming together with all of the appropriate information that needs to be on it. And you can alter the design anytime you want. So at this point here, we have the color name with appropriate barcode. We have a date for it. We have a lot number that we can read and also a barcode number that we can scan for using this in MixMaster. So the procedure is pretty much step and repeat. This is the best way to build a label, is to start with one item, going into label design, setting up your specs, setting up your fields one item at a time, making sure you bring in what you want, going to the design tab, placing that into the grid where it needs to be, representing the dimension of the label, saving it, which will then update it. Then returning back to the main label screen, putting some information into the field, and then testing it with the print routine. And then once again, step and repeat back to label to design and so forth. Now, in getting data to your label, there's a number of different ways. As you've seen in this example, I've manually typed information in. I can also bring data over to this label screen through this feature here, which is called Get Data. If I press the Get Data button, I can actually pick a database within MixMaster that I want to extract information out of with, say, a mouse click. So let's just say I wanted to get some information about a color from the Custom database. I can say, okay, I want to work with this database and I want to get a label for an item that would be cataloged in my basics and additives section. So I would have a list of all of the material that's in my basic section, so I could just randomly grab something like this. Then if I had a lot number, I could pick a lot number that exists for that product. And with these items selected, instead of typing something, I can use this as selection, and then I can press select. And as you see, by using the get data, I was able to go and mouse click my way into some type of selection of information that I wanted on my label. So therefore, I didn't have to type it. So always remember, get data is a very convenient way to come to this screen with no information and without having to type it. Pressing the get data button, you can make these selections from here and then bring it right back to here so that you're right on to what needs to be done, which is printing. There are also other ways of bringing data to this screen as well. So if we were to clear the fields, for example, in other videos, we've shown this as well. Let's just say we were working in a basics additive window, and I'll just randomly select something here as well. You'll notice that I've got a particular ingredient on screen. Matter of fact, let me see if I pick something different. I have an ingredient on screen right now, and let's see, what am I using? We'll just do some random data here as well. Cancel that. Yeah. We'll just randomly select an item here. It doesn't matter at the moment. The important part is that while working on this screen, we can actually take information that might be present here and transfer it to the print label screen by pressing the print label button. So in doing so, it brings this information over to the screen so the user can minimize the amount of information they might have to key in at this point. The basic window is one window where you can print a label from. You could do this from a master formula screen. You could be on a master formula screen, have a variety of key data points ready to go for a label and press print label, and that information is transferred over into the label screen. This also can be done from the inventory window. You could be working on a manual adjustment of inventory, and you might have good information here that you need a label for. You press the print label button, and that information transferred over. Last but not least, and this is a very handy window to be working from and have to transfer information over to, is batch window. You could be creating a batch of ink, have a recipe on screen with relevant data. You may need a variety of information here, job numbers, I'm just typing in random data. But with all of this information, you might need a label for this particular product. Once it's been packaged, you're going to need some type of label for it. So with this batch on screen, you can actually print the print label button. And then with that, it brings over all of this relevant information that is coming from the batch window. Once again, alleviating any of the need for the user, or at least minimizing the amount of effort that it takes to actually now produce a label for this. In this case here, you can just say, I need 5 labels and press the print button, and now you would have 5 labels already for your kit and containers. And this pretty much will conclude the general overview of how to build a label, construct a label, use a label, how to get information onto a label using the MixMaster General Labels screen.